Hi everyone and welcome to this second part of this TouchDesigner project review. Today we'll continue where we left off in the previous tutorial. So last time we took a look at this TouchDesigner project, we took a look at how it worked, what it was doing, and we made some improvement to a few of the effects that are applied in this project. We, for example, were able to drastically improve the RGB delay that is used here, where we went from a 3-section network to a single line network that is way easier to understand and use well less resources, both processing power and CPU and GPU memory. So we kinda improved the treatment part of this project, but we left aside the data acquisition part of the project. And by that, I'm talking about the video inputs of the project. So currently we have this simple patch here, this simple network that takes the increment and decrement buttons from our MIDI controller. So I can go to the next video and the previous video and we can see change here. One of the problem with this is that if you look here at the FPS, you can see that every time or almost every time I change a video, we have a drop in FPS, which is a real problem because we want to be as close to the real time as possible. So one of the things we have to look at is to see how we can improve that to have better performances when changing files. So we're gonna do just a quick review of how TouchDesigner is loading a file and how all of this is working so we can be sure we understand what we're doing when we're gonna work on this. So on this particular computer I'm using for this tutorial, it's a hard disk drive and not an SSD, so the performance are not as great as they could be if I was using an SSD, but most of us here still use HDD because it's still the most popular type of hard drive around, even though SSD is the go-to type of hard drive you have to look to if you want to do real-time effects. So here I am, I have all my files, all my rushes on this folder here. All my files are in MP4 format, so they are H.264 encoded, and the H.264 compression is really interesting because it allows us to have a high quality video file in a compact format, but this implies that you need to use more processing power to decode the file, and because of that we're losing time, we're losing frame when we're changing a video file because the TouchDesigner has to go to the file, so the hard drive has to physically move its arm to the file location, which is already taking time, and then we have to decode the file. We have to read a bit of it, decode it, and then keep doing this in real time to display the video. This whole decoding part is what's taking a lot of resources, and the use of these resources can also have impact on the rest of your project, because if the most of the available resources on your CPU is being used to decode the videos, you don't have a lot of left to do your effects. So this is one thing that needs to be optimized, and we're gonna take a look at this. So if for any reason you're stuck with MP4 and you cannot change to any other format more suitable, we're gonna talk about them in a few seconds. In the tune panel in the movie file in top, there is this hardware decode toggle with absolutely no help attached to it. By enabling this, if you have an NVIDIA GPU, you will be able to use the hardware performances to decode H.264 and as well as H.265 on some more modern GPU, I guess, but you'll have to check for this. So anyway, this option is not enabled by default, so make sure to check it if you're working with H.264 files. Another possibility to improve these performances is to change the format of the video. As we just said, MP4, H.264, H.265, and so on, they're all using a lot of processing power from the CPU or the GPU if it can decode it. And we want to kind of improve this because we want to have our processors focused on applying our effects, not just on loading the videos. So for this, you can change your video, you can convert them to HAP. HAP is a video format that makes all the decoding stuff directly on the GPU. The CPU has absolutely nothing to do. So you get to save quite a lot of processing power using it. One thing though is that HAP is not a compressed format, so files kind of get big really fast, so you have to make sure you have enough disk space for this, and of course an SSD is suitable and preferable in this situation due to the large size of the file. But we're gonna see that just by using HAP video file, even on a hard disk, you still get quite a lot of performance improvements. I have here all the rushes from before already converted to HAP. I used AVF batch converter on Mac, so I'll put a link in the description for you. On Windows, I don't know what you could use to convert the videos. Maybe check in the around FFmpeg. That wouldn't surprise me if it's able to convert the videos. And if you find it, just let me know so I can put a link to it in the description. Okay, so here are all my files converted to HAP. So I'm gonna change my input right here. I have an input folder, and I'm gonna change from using my current rush to using the HAP rushes. So the change has been done. So I'm still in my source selector and I'm gonna start changing videos. And already we can see that there is way less drops in the FPS. I'll have to really go fast, and even then there's not so much of a drop. So already we have saved a lot of performances, and we could stay here and don't go any further. That would work actually. But I want to show you a way to make a really robust source selector, something that can work with a really large file, a lot of file, and who is able to handle changing sources really fast in a list. So that's what we're gonna do together today. This is gonna imply a bit of Python to implement all of this, so it's gonna be quite a lot of fun if you follow through. Okay, so this part of the network is good because it gives us exactly what we want, which is the index of the video we need. So we're not gonna change this a lot. What we're gonna change is this part, which is how the video is loaded, and specifically the movie file in. So I'm gonna set aside those three nodes. They're just for the node viewer, and I don't want to change them because they're doing fine work and there's no need to remove them or change them. Okay, so how are we gonna optimize video loading? So first of all, what happens when we change a video? When we change a video, the source index gets updated, which in turn updates the source selected here, which in turn updates the file here. So I click on the button, the event goes through all those nodes and in this movie file in. So we're still in the same frame at this moment. So still in the same frame, still in this 16.6 millisecond that we talked about last time. I have to load a new file. So that means a disk read on the same frame. After the disk read, I have to send everything to the GPU, have decoded it before, or in this case not, since we're using HAP. And then finally, TouchDesigner can carry on with the rest of my project. So that's kind of a lot of thing to do in one disk read, and that's why we have some FPS drop when we change file, because it takes longer than 16.6 milliseconds for TouchDesigner to do this disk read and start decoding the file. So what we want to do is we want to spread those actions in multiple frames. So one thing we're kind of sure here is that we cannot go forward 2, 3, 4 or multiple videos in the same frame. We can change exactly to the next or the previous video on one frame, not 2, not 3. So that's interesting for us, because that means at all time we always know what will be the next video to be played or the previous video that can be played. So we can use that to anticipate what the user is gonna do, to preload the videos in advance. One way to do this would be to have like a replicator, which replicate a movie file in, one for every video in the list. But here we already have a really long list, like 165 videos, so that would put a lot of strain on our system. Even though TouchDesigner will not load all of them at the same time, it will still have to keep record of those 165 movie file in, and that will also not help us, since because TouchDesigner is not executing an operator if it's not part of the final output. All the movie filing that are not used currently will just not cook even when they're just being created. So that means that we will have to like preload all the videos manually before, costing a lot of resources at the same time and adding a mental strain, as we will have to remember every time we start the project to load all those videos. We could do that with an execute that and on start script that loads all this thing, but that would mean that if like your project crash during your set and you have to restart it, you'll be stuck more time just waiting for all these videos to load. So, and that also will use a lot more of memories, because if all the files are loaded, then it means that a few frames of all the videos are stored somewhere in RAM memory or GPU memory, taking place for other things that could be done taking place that could be used by other thing in your project. So no, we're not gonna load all the file at the same time. No, we're gonna try to anticipate the next files and the previous files in order to be prepared for the next actions of our user. For this, we're gonna lay the basic ground up. So I'm gonna remove this movie file in, I'm gonna remove this select, put the out on the side, and we're gonna go step by step. So as we said, we want a movie file in for the current file being played. And we also want another movie file in for the next file that could be played, and another one for the previous file that could be played. I'm just gonna keep them in this order so it's easier with the numbers. And I'm just not gonna do the next file and the previous file, because if we're skipping fast in the videos, I think it would be interesting to have the two previous and the two next file already preloaded. So we're gonna create this we're gonna create this 5 movie filing named with suffix going from 0 to 4. Okay, so I have those 5 movie filing, and there's gonna be a switch right at the end that will always select the movie filing we want. I think you can just see where this is going from now, as we will always have the 2 previous videos, the current video and the next video, and the switch will just select the one we want. The tricky part about this is that let's say this operator is loading the, I don't know, like the 15th video, this one is loading the 16th, the 17th, and so those one are loading the 14th and the 13th. So I'm reading the 15th video and I want to load the 16th. I don't want this operator to go from 15 to 16, as that would imply unloading the 15 and starting to load the 16 from scratch, and that's what we want to avoid. We want to keep the 15 here and move there to the 16 directly, so the switch will change, but the 2 file used by this node will not change. So this means we will have an active operator that will be moving, like if I go next, I end here, then next again we loop here, 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 and previous in the other order. And on the unused operators, we will change the files on the go so that the users on the end sees nothing different from like it would only have 1 movie file in, but in the back we're in fact already preloading 2 file next and 2 file prev. So if it starts skipping fast to another file, it's already preloaded, and we've saved a few precious FPS in the way. So we have our 5 operators. Now we need to tell them which files to load. And we can just say, okay, you're loading the first one, the second one, the third one, and so on, because as we just discussed, there will be some kind of rotation going on with the files. So let's start from the beginning. I need to know which movie filing I'm gonna load. And this will be cyclic, going from 0 to 4 and always looping. So I'm gonna extract this information with another counter here. So I'm gonna copy and paste this one, and instead of going from 0 to 164, which is the number of available videos in the current folder, I'm just gonna go from 0 to 4. So that's a 5 number count. So I will go to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and loop again to 0. And I'm gonna make the reset to 2, so when we reset this operator, it will reset to the middle video. It's not necessary, but I think it's just better to start in the middle, so it's more explicit with the previous and the next videos. Here, let's try it. Okay, I'm gonna reset. Okay. So I have the 4th, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm gonna link this on the switch to the index of the switch. We'll make a chop reference. Our index is changing based on if I'm moving forward or backward. Okay, so now we need to use this information as well as the current source index to determine which file is gonna be loaded by which movie file in. For this, we're gonna work with multiple mat chop and a limit that will allow us to determine which videos we're gonna load. So one thing is that all our videos are in this file, and on each line appears 1 video. So we know that if we're loading the video on the 5th line here, this one has to load the video on the 4th, on the 2nd, and this one on the 6th, and this one on the 7th. So it's just a matter of the source row +1, +2, or -1, -2. So we're gonna do this using mat chops. I'm gonna create a math right here. So this one will be for the movie file in 0, so that will be -2. And I'm gonna do the same for the second one, which in this case is a -1. The third one, which is the middle one, will stay the same. And for the fourth one, it's a +1. And for the fifth one, it's a +2. Okay, so we can see that we have currently we're loading the 87, and here we have the 86, 85, 88, 89. Great. But we're not gonna load this directly right here, because we're gonna face a problem, which is that if like in the first video, this one will be the 0 video, which is okay. There's a line named 0, and even though it's not used, we can accept it to load the current line +1. But this one, which is -2, will start trying to load a negative video, and that's a problem because we don't want to load negative video, we want to load like the last video. So in order to prevent trying to access lines in the source videos that doesn't exist, we'll have to make sure all those values are looping between 0 and the maximum number of available videos. So I'm not gonna put like 5 limits around here, I'm just gonna merge all of these nodes. This one as well, here. Okay, so I have all the source index that rename themselves with nothing or 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm gonna add a limit right there. That's gonna be a loop, and then it's gonna go between 0, and this is gonna go to the maximum number of available videos, which is the number of available rows here, -1. So to access the number of available rows here, we're gonna use a little bit of Python. So for this, I'm gonna start by selecting this node, so that's OP, and the node is named input1, so IM1, and I'm gonna select one of its properties, which is num rows, if I'm not mistaken, and just because this number says the number of rows and not the number of the last rows, we have to do a -1 to be sure it's the correct values. I'm gonna press enter, and here we have 164, and if we look at this, we have 165, which is perfect. Okay, so now we see that we have our loops right there, and if I'm going right to the end, okay, so we can see that it's looping exactly like we wanted it to, and that's exactly what we want. Okay, so now all the movie filing right here will use these values to select which videos they're gonna play. But as we said, we want, like, if I go on the next video, I don't want all the movie filing to change their source. I want like the 3 in the center to stay the same and only the 2 extremities to adjust. To do that, we're gonna have to use also this value right here, which is what we're gonna say our active input. And we're gonna make sure to fix this reference as well. So we want to make sure the active input is actually being used. So I'm just gonna put a null here that I'm gonna call source indexes, which actually holds the source indexes of the videos we have to load. How are we gonna make those 2 values work for us in those inputs? So for this, we'll have to do multiple things. The first file will not always load the first channel right here. Why? Because when we're shifting, when we're moving forward or backwards, we want this to stay the same for a few shifts and only reload when it's one of the extremities. So based on the active input, we'll have to adjust which source we are loading. So we're gonna do this step by step. It's gonna be quite a lengthy Python input, so I'm not gonna write it here, even though I can extend it. I'm gonna press Ctrl E, which will open this in Sublime Text, for example, so it's easier to write. Okay, so Sublime is right here. I'm gonna put them side by side. So the first thing we need is to select one of the video here. So I'm gonna rename this sources. Should have done it way long ago. Gonna repair this. Okay, so this is working. So we're gonna go back here. Control E. We're gonna improve this. So, first thing is to load one of the line of the sources operator, which holds all our videos. So, we're gonna do an OP. Okay, we're gonna select our sources operator. We're gonna select I don't know which line net, so I'm gonna put a 0 here, and then I'm gonna say I want the second column because the first column only holds the names of the videos, the paths are in the second column. So that would be a first example. So I'm gonna go and save this, and here we see that it loaded the first line, which just holds the title. So let's say we want the first line, and here we are loading a video file. Now we want this to be related to the source indexes given here. So I'm gonna start by getting the number of the line I want to load from the first channel here. I think it's a good start. Okay, so I'm gonna put some lines here. Those new lines poses no problem when you're writing one line only expressions. Just remember that when you will close and save this and edit it later, all the return characters will be replaced with spaces. So it does not remember that you wanted it to be on multiple lines, but it will still work perfectly fine. It just have to be contained in only one expression. I'm gonna select one of the channel. Here's the first one yet, and use it to select my source. So for this I need to get the OP source indexes, and there I'm gonna select the first channel, and I'm gonna select the first sample on this channel, even though all these channels will always be single sampled channels. I'm putting it this explicitly, so explicit on what I'm doing right here. So by just doing this, I'm saying I want the number 1 here, the first sample of the first channel. So I'm gonna save this. Okay, seems to work. TouchDesigner has got the reference, and this one is the, yeah, I cannot open your file. And why is that? So this resolves to none. Which is a problem. So I believe the problem is coming from source indexes, and why I believe this is because channels in TouchDesigner holds floating point values, not integer values. And when you're selecting a row or a column in a dot, you need to give them integer values, not floating points values. So I'm gonna explicitly say here that I want an integer value. I'm gonna save here, and now it's working. Now we see that when I go forward or backwards, it does change. So right now all we have done is reproduce what we had before, but we still haven't done any optimization yet. Now we want the channels we're selecting, currently the first one, to be influenced by the active input specified right here. And how do we want this to influence us? Well, we're gonna use the same trick we used with the source indexes by adding a loop. But because we're gonna do this directly on Python, we're gonna do our loop using modulo. Let me explain. What we want is, we said here that our reset value was 2. So when we reset here, this should use the middle channel, this one's the second channel, and this one the first channel. But let's say now that I go one step backwards, this one is loading the 7th file, and if I go one step backward, I still want it to load the 7th file, but here it changed to the 6th file, and that's not what I want. I want to be the movie file in which was loading the more forward file, which would have been this one, to load now the 6th file, so it's moving up. And to do this, I can clearly see that instead of selecting the first index, I now have to select the second index in there, and that means I have to use this active input information to select the appropriate index. So because we're working with file movie filing, we will have a -1, a -2, and a +1 and a +2 offset to be sure that each movie filing is actually using a different index than the others. So I'm gonna go back to this expression right here, and what I'm gonna say, so as you can see, the line breaks have been forgotten by Touch, but that's not a problem. We're gonna do it like this. Yeah, perfect. So I want this value to be influenced by the active index we just talked about. So we're gonna do it step by step, just as always. So first we're gonna select the active input value. So that would be OP active input. There's only one channel, so 0, and always one sample as always, so 0. Now we want this to not always be the same, but to change based on if I'm the first movie file in, the second, the third, and so on. So as we keep this movie file in the center of attention, this one will have a 0 offset, this one a -1, and this one a -2. So I'm gonna add the -2 offset right here. Okay, so it's still right there, so I'm gonna just copy paste it here. Okay, I want a -2 offset. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna select the first sample, as we said, and I'm gonna remove 2 from it, so we are 2 indexes behind it, and I'm gonna take all this, and because I don't want to have an index that's like -2 or whatever, I'm gonna make sure this doesn't go over 5. So this symbol here, if you don't know it, is the modulo operator. So a modulo is giving you the rest from an Euclidean division. So if, like here, I have, I don't know, 3 and I divide it by 5, I cannot remove 5 from 3, so the division result will be 0, and the remaining is 3, so 3 modulo 5 give us 3. But if I have like 7 and I do 7 modulo 5, I can subtract 5 from 7, that gives me 2, and that's one of the way of doing a loop, as the output value from a modulo operation will never be above the divider. Okay, and as we said before, this is a channel value, which is a floating point value, and we want an integer value. So I'm gonna add a conversion around it, just like that. So I'm gonna save that, and we're gonna see what happens around here. So this is loading the 10th video, and okay, I'm gonna go forward and it's loading the 7th. Why not? 9, 11, 13. Okay, so here we have a problem. We are skipping one video on two, and that's not what we want. Of course, we want this to stay the same for a few times, then change to the next requested video. And one of the reasons that why this is happening, we cannot just simply remove 2 out of the active input. Let's do an example. So I'm gonna copy this and keep it in my pasteboard, and I'm gonna simply output the result of the modulo operation. So I'm gonna save that. So here it's 4, okay? I'm gonna do forward 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, but this means we're always loading another file. Here we're doing the 17, then the 19, then the 21, and so on. And actually what we want is this to go the other way. So we're loading like the 21, and when I go forward, we keep loading the 21 by selecting not the next index, but the previous one. So we actually have to remove this. So I'm gonna put back what was that. And here I'm gonna change this. So I want this to go the other way. So I'm gonna put it on the other way. So instead of doing R indexed minus R offset, I'm gonna do R offset in negative minus our active input. I'm gonna save that, and I'm gonna see it here, and if I go forward, it stays on 23, it stays on 23, it stays on 23, it goes through the 28 one time, 28 two time, 28 three time, 28 four time, 28 five time. Here up we go 5 videos next because we're moving forward. And here we are, we have the first movie filing in here doing exactly what we want, which is loading only 1 videos of 5 and keeping it until we need it, and keeping it until we don't need it anymore and replace it with a more relevant video. So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna adjust it and scale it to the other one. So the only difference between all those movie filing in the operators is instead of having -2 here, which is my offset, I'm gonna have -1 for this one. I'm not gonna have any offset here, +1 here, +2 here. So I'm gonna do this right now. So -2 becomes -1. Looks like we've done kind of a lot of work, so let's see what's happening here. Currently I'm displaying the last video, which can be seen here. I'm gonna move to the next one, which in all logic should be this one, and it does, and we can see that we are preloading videos one step before, and we said we wanted to preload the videos 2 steps before. So in order to do this, we're not gonna load the active index, which is displayed here. We're gonna display the active indexed -1, and I'll have to make it loop using another modulo here, so it stays between 0 and 5 and doesn't go above or below this range. So now we are loading the middle video here. I'm gonna move forward here, and it's not the next video but the 2 next video that change. And as we see, all the videos are updating before mine. This way the video is always preloaded when I start using it. So that's one thing that's kinda efficient, but I have a few problems still here. The first of them is that I have absolutely no guarantee that when I start playing in video, I am actually at the beginning of the video. Because the video is already playing in the background. It may be in the middle, it may be anywhere, but there's like very little chance it's actually at the beginning. To make sure the video is at the beginning, I'm going to use one of the movie filing functionality, which is the cue right here. The cue lets you jump straight to a certain point in the video. For example, here it's already set to 0%, which is the beginning of the video. So if I pulse it, the video restart. I'm gonna take this one, which is more explicit. If I pulse it, the video restart. Okay, great. Now what I want is when I start playing a video, when the switch selected, I want to cue this video just one time to be sure I start playing it from the beginning when I'm using it. So for this, I'm gonna base myself on the fact that I need to cue the video when this value change. So for this, I'm gonna use a dot named parameter execute right here, which allows me to execute Python script based on the parameter of a node and the way they are changing. So the parameter is named index. I'm gonna say I want exclusively this one, only when it change, and I want only to watch built-in parameters because the index parameters is a built-in operator, and as I wanted to execute a script only when the value changed. So I'm gonna edit this script in an external editor so I can have coloring. And so here we are on the onValueChange function. I removed the other function because I'm not using them, and so they're not cluttering my workspace. What I want now is to select the currently used movie filing and to cue it so its video restart. I have to select my movie filing, so OP, movie file in, and now I need to tell if it's 0, 1, 2, 3 or 4th one. And to do this, I need to know this number, because if it's the third number, I know that 0, 1, 2, 3, I'm using the movie file in 3. And thankfully, this part argument given to me here is the parameter object that has changed, so it will always be the index parameters, because I told this parameter execute to only execute this function when the index parameter updates. So here I will be able to get it by, to be explicit and pedantic, I'm gonna store it here. The index, I'm gonna name it like this, is the parameter.eval. But one problem with the parameter.eval is that it gives us, I think it's a string value, and this value may even be with like a floating point value. Like the way TouchDesigner handles parameters and the values of parameters is rather cryptic and inconsistent in my opinion, so I'm gonna make sure I take all the precautions, all the safety needed when using these parameters. So I want to make sure it's an integer, because I don't want to load the movie file in 1.0 because it wouldn't work. So I'm gonna make sure the value I get is an integer right there, and because I will have to concatenate the index value with this string right here, I'm gonna convert it directly to string like this. So right there, I'm now able to do this, which is movie filing concatenated with the currently displayed index, which always match the number of the movie filing, its digit. And now I am able to access its parameters. So I know a movie filing has this pulse button for the cue, which is named Q pulse, and this I'm gonna pulse this button using the built-in method pulse. And right there I have what I need, because if I save this and switch videos, and you can see that the videos is always restarting. Like this one starts completely green, then all the circles starts displaying, so up it resets it as I starts playing it, which is what I want, and this is great. But we still have one little things to take care of before we have finished with this. Right now I have all the viewer displayed, so that means TouchDesigner is always cooking all those nodes so I can see their current state using their viewers. But when the project is going on, I mean this state, and only the selected video is used. And because TouchDesigner is doing anything it can to protect performances, and so it is absolutely not cooking the other movie file in, because they are not used, so they are being ignored when the frame is rendered, which means that when I start switching, you can see that I'm having still FPS drops, for the simple reasons that there's absolutely no preloading. It looks like everything we've done would have been for nothing, except there is a simple solution to this, and we're gonna take a look at it right now. So we have these 5 movie file in, which are kinda defaulted because I haven't adjusted any parameters on them, and we're gonna do this right now. So in the first pane, there's not so much to do. Just make sure, like in this case, we want the play mode to be sequential, so it's not linked to the timeline or anything else. And we want like them to always play and all those things. And there is this tune pane where we can adjust a few things, and there's these pre-read frames here. The pre-read frames tells how much frames TouchDesigner should have in memories in advance at all time to minimize latency introduced by discretes, for example. So right now we're working with HAP files, and we're on a hard disk drive, so we don't need the hardware decoding option, because this is for x265, x264 codecs, which is not our case, and high performance read based on the help is actually targeted more for SSD disk, and since this is an HDD, I'm not gonna use it. And if you have an SSD, just try using it and see if it helps you. It might depend on your SSD type and the size of your file and all those other things, so just try it and see if it helps you. So the pre-read frames right here, they are 3, and so all those videos always have 3 frames read in advance. And if I look at the information, I can see that my project is actually using 414 megabytes of GPU memory of the 8 gigabytes available. So I think I'm gonna upgrade this to not 3, but like 7, I don't know, a value higher, to make sure TouchDesigner has enough content in memory to handle properly FPS drops and is quicker to react and all those things. So I can see that I'm using more memories than before. I'm up to 444, which is not much more than before. So I think I'm good, and I'm gonna keep this like it this way, and I'm gonna also tick this, which is the always load initial frame, and if we base ourselves on the help, we can see that this way TouchDesigner ensures the node always starts up with a valid image, and that's actually what we want, so we're gonna turn this on. Okay, so right here I know that TouchDesigner is preloading the movie by a full frame, but this doesn't solve this problem here, which is that it may not be preloading the movie file in for the simple reason that they are not in the render tree. And a simple way to check this is to open the performance monitor, do an analyze, and then we're gonna take a look at movie file in it. So enter, and we see that only one is appearing for the simple reason that the other one are not being rendered. We're still stuck at the same position that just a few minutes ago, and we're gonna see how we can improve this. We know for a fact that every time we move forward or backwards, there is one video that change what is being loaded. For this to work, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tell the +2 and the -2 video to force cook themselves so they can preload the video. To force cook a node is to have it update even though it should not update because it's not a part of the render tree, or because there's absolutely nothing changed in it, so it doesn't need to recalculate its values. But by force cooking it, I make sure it executes. So in our case, we make sure it preloads the file. And I'm gonna use this parameter execute right here because it's already there. It's already being triggered every time we change a video, which is perfect for us because it's the exact moment we want to force cook our nodes. So I'm gonna edit this one again. Yeah, okay, so I get it right here. And for start, I will need the index right here because this index is the current movie filing being used. So I want to get the second next and the second previous one and force cook them both to be sure the newly loaded video is preloaded. So instead of changing it to a string right here, I'm gonna move that to the second line so I can keep using the index as a number and do math with it. Okay, so I have the current movie file in, which is this one. Now I'm gonna select the second next movie file in to trigger it. So that would be OP movie file in, just as before. But instead of having just the index, I'm gonna do a +2 on the index to select the second next. But as before, we still have this problem of going out of range, because if the current is a movie file in is the fourth one, we don't want to try to force cook a sixth movie file in because it doesn't exist. We want to select the first one, which is the second next node. So as before, we're gonna do a simple modulo right here. So I'm gonna put this into parentheses and add my modulo right there. So what am I doing here? I'm doing the current index +2, modulo 5 to stay in bounds, and convert everything to string so I can concatenate it with the previous statement movie file in. And here I'm gonna force cook it, so it's just .cook, and this just trigger a classic cook. I wanted to make sure it cooks every time I asked it to and not just when it needs to. So I have the possibility to add a force equal true. And this way I know for a fact that it will cook. So I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna hide all the viewers so it looks like we're on top of it. And if you look at it, you see that it says CPU cook time not measured on previous cook. Why? Because this one is using the fourth movie filing. So the four other ones are just not cooking because they're not used, while this one is cooking every frame. And let's say I'm gonna go next, so I'm not gonna use the fourth one anymore, but the 0 one. And when using the 0 one, That means the movie file in 2 in the future will have updated, and to prove this, we're gonna take a look at the total number of cooks, which currently is 61,105. So I'm gonna go do next, and now I'm gonna take a look at it, and it's 61,106. So we have the proof right here that this not actually cooked. So this one has preloaded its content, and that's great. That's exactly what we wanted. So I'm gonna go back to this one, and I'm gonna copy and paste this line and do the same thing for the second movie filing, but this one, the previous filing, the previous movie filing. So save, and I think we're good. Like, if I'm moving forward, I can move pretty fast, and I stay at this 60 FPS, and that's perfect. And there's actually no drop, or almost no drop at all, which is great. So I'm gonna save my file right here to be sure it's good, and I'm just gonna take a look. So right here I'm using the third one as the number 3, so it's the fourth one, sorry, and that's the HUD 26, and that's exactly what's happening here. So we still have the same behavior of having the name of the video being displayed on the viewer if needed, and it still matches the currently displayed video, which is again perfect for us. So right now we have greatly improved our source selector. We have changed the file type, going from H264 to HAP, which is file format that decode on the GPU, saving us a lot of processing time on the CPU. Because HAP file takes way more space on the disk, we prefer using a SSD with them, so we get the most of it and the best performances as possible. And secondly, we've added this kind of circular buffer here, where our videos are already preloaded. The two next video are already preloaded, and the two previous videos are also preloaded. So at any time we can move forward or backwards without introducing any drops in the FPS, which is what we want. And this ensures an efficient and powerful project where the resources are really saved as much as possible, so we have all the computing power we need to drive our effects. And I think I'm gonna stop right here for today. We've done quite a lot of jobs. We've seen quite a lot of concepts, some kind of hard or harder than others, like this system of 5 buffers using source indexes and an active input value to select the correct source indexes, and change only every 5 videos. And all of this may seem a bit complicated, but if you are doing this on your project, just take your time, and when it's working, just do a pause, stop it, close TouchDesigner, and review what you've done like the day after, and take your time and just go over it again and again, and that will be an efficient way to understand what you're doing and improve yourself over time. So someone on the YouTube channel asked if I could share this project with you. The thing is, this project is not mine, it's a project of a friend who gave it to me so I could do these videos on it. But I have in mind of doing other videos about other aspects of TouchDesigner, where we would build things from scratch together. And in this project, then yes, I will share with you the source files. But here, this is a review of a project made by someone else, and who hadn't intended for its project to be shared with anyone. So I'm just using it as a way to showcase optimization techniques and performance improvement things you can do on your project too. And I thought that using a real life project would be more meaningful, as there would be cases that are more representative of what people do in their project, and not just examples from scratch, where that would still be, I believe, interesting to see, but would not have the same meaning as just improving something that has been already done but can be made better. So I hope you enjoyed this video as well. Thank you for watching. There's still one episode in this series where we will look more closely at the MIDI inputs used in this project. And I hope you learned some things. And if you have any question, any comment, just feel free to ask. I'll be glad to answer you. And see you next time. Bye.